and several artists as well, all based on beautiful botanical illustrations. So Jim actually did manage to get across from Heathrow this morning despite delays with Aer Lingus because of snow, so we're delighted to have him here today. Can I welcome also Darach Lupton from our site at Glasnevin in Dublin. Just want to point out to you actually some of our own staff here today, and also just a little bit of health and safety and housekeeping from the beginning.
But Seamus, it's fantastic what you've got here. And as a person called Declan, who's a chauffeur, he took me various places around when I came to Ireland. And he said, and I asked him how he was, and he said, I'm showing the best side out. and so Kilmacurragh is certainly showing his best side out today.
Right. You mightn't have said it if you were here at 6 a.m. Fantastic.
Shines on the righteous.
Magnesia and so on. But the other genus that's within the Magnoliaceae, within the Magnolia family, of course, is Liriodendron, which is the big tree in the background, Liriodendron tulipifera, as the Americans call it, the tulip poplar, which is a really important timber tree. Magnolias formerly grew right across the northern hemisphere. We find them in the fossil record going back over 100 million years, and fossil records have appeared in places like Greenland, right across Europe, right across Siberia, and of course various eras of glaciation have confined them to about 75% of the species are found in the Old World, mostly in Asia, the Himalaya and China. About 25% of species are in the New World, from North America, of course, and we'll be looking at some of those species, and down into the neotropics, places like Colombia, for example. What's really important to highlight, and you'll have seen Darach talk about this on the videos that were posted on YouTube during the week, is that there's over 40% of magnolias are threatened in one form or other in the wild. It will be looking in the wall garden at Magnolia zenii, for example. There's 18 trees left in the wild in eastern China.
Just to add to what Seamus has said, there's also examples of pollen found in the London trains.
Wow,
well.
okay.
Magnolia cobus. But Magnolia grandiflora, magnolias actually started off their lives in North America as Magnolia lataensis. There's a man, he was flattening out an area of ground that he's wanting to create a tennis court, and he put his digger into this shale, and out fluttered all these leaves, magnolias, cercidifilum, ginkgos. And so there's a big dig, and there's a chap called Dick Figler, who's going to be the recipient of the Jim Gardner Magnolia Cup this year, went over to Moscow, Idaho, to have a look at this site. And I've got a picture of Dick with a fossil record of Magnolia lataensis in his hand, which is Magnolia grandiflora today.
Wow, okay, yep. We'll have to search our fossils and see what we've got. It was described from collections made by an Italian missionary in Hubei province in central China, but the original collection, the discoverer, was Augustine Henry, the Irish plant collector. He had found it. It was one of his earliest collections in 1885, and it was in the first consignment of plants that he sent back to Kew in 1885. So this is a selection. It's from Landhydrach in Cornwall, and Jim, I'm going to let you tell the group a little bit about this selection.
Yes, Magnolia sprengeri was first introduced into cultivation by Ernest Wilson under the Wilson collection number of Wilson 688. And in the great Beaches closing down sale of 1913, there's all the great and the good were assembled to buy some of these lots, and there's 13 seedlings of sprengeri. Most of them went to either Aberconway at Bodnant or to Kew, and one went to J.C. Williams at Carhays. And the white form, sprengeri, is the white one that went to, that literally exclusively was found at Bodnant and at Kew. But J.C. Williams, when it flowered, it was a beautiful pink, and JC hadn't seen anything quite like this before, and so he called it the goddess magnolia. And it's very readily forms viable seed, and so as a result of that, you get first, second and third generation seedlings, and Landhydrach is probably either a second or a third generation seedling. But they're absolutely magnificent. They're beautiful pink. but also vary very slightly to a pale pink, or possibly not a white, but certainly on the pale pink side. Erland Ida in the early 2000s wanted to find out whether Magnolia sprengeri could be found in the wild, and so he linked up with a school of botany in university in China, and they went out into China, and they discovered lots of forms of sprengeri, and they found it both north and south of the Yangtze, and primarily anything that was grown from the south of the Yangtze was pink, anything that was north of the Yangtze was white, but some in between were striped, pink and white. Quite interesting to see. And I was fortunate to be at Carhays about a week, well, literally a week ago. And at Carhays, I gave them one of these plants, and it's called Dusty Pink. And it was to do with, they found this particular plant on a rather dusty road hillside in Hubei province. And they also had an illusion, because of the beauty of the pink, to dusty Springfield as well.
Okay.
But when I smelt it, it was a most marvellous scent. I'd never really smelt sprengeri before, as powerful as I smelt on this particular plant on this occasion.
Yeah, it will get huge. So in Irish gardens, if you know Hedford, the school, and if you know the wall garden behind that, there's Magnolia sprengeri diva, and there's ordinary Magnolia sprengeri, and they're as big as sycamore trees. They're absolutely huge. Should mention as well, the garden that Jim mentioned, Carhays or Cairhays, belongs to the Williams family. We're going to be talking more about that in the wall garden. It's in Cornwall near St. Austell, and it has the world's largest collection. So Britain and Ireland's largest collection. It's over 600 different species and cultivars, and not just that, the family over 3 generations have been breeding magnolias. You'll see a lot of these as we walk through the garden. What we're looking at today essentially is the rebuilding of the Magnolia collection here at Kilmacurragh. We know that the family were very fond of magnolias. When we get into the wall garden, I can show you, for example, where there were glasshouse ranges where they grew Magnolia figo, tender species. They grew purely for its scent. We'll be looking, as we walk towards the wall garden, at historic collections that came from Glasnevin. Now, as you know, Kilmacurragh had a pretty sad fate over the 20th century. A lot of the collections were depleted. So we've been building over the last couple of years a huge Magnolia collection behind the scenes, mostly in 3 different field nurseries. So we'll be looking at one of those field nurseries today, looking at not just the species, but actually Jim is going to tell you a bit about the Gresham hybrids, the Jury hybrids, what's being bred in America, what's being bred by the New Zealand breeders. What I should say about this particular selection of Magnolia sprengeri, by the way, is that it flowers later than typical Magnolia sprengeri, and that's why it's cited here, because we do get a fair old stiff breeze coming through from the east. The other thing that we've done recently as well, if you sort of see, you can see that we've reopened here. We have a problem, as all Irish gardens have, with sooty mould on our rhododendrons, and you can actually reduce that by increasing the air circulation in the garden. If you visit places like Ardnamona in Donegal, for example, on Lough Esk, when you're out on the lakeside where the rhododendrons are fully exposed, they're absolutely free of sooty mould, but in the more congested parts of the garden, it is a problem. So it is important to have some air circulation running through the garden. This is Magnolia sprengeri Landhydrock from a famous garden, National Trust, I think?
Yes, it's National
in
Trust,
Cornwall.
yes.
Yeah. So just a little bit of housekeeping. We're going to state flower of Missouri, and it's called a Bulbay or Southern Magnolia. It's a sort of an iconic emblem of the southeast states of North America. In Irish gardens, we don't get the sort of lovely sunshine, Jim, that you're used to in the home counties. The sun is a sort of a rare factor in Irish gardens, so we need to be careful where we place it. So it has to be in a very warm space. But this is a really warm corner of the garden, and we find actually as well that we're better to plant named cultivars. So Egsbury, which is one of the oldest of the English cultivars, is probably the best to grow in an Irish situation. This is one called Victoria, and Victoria, lovely sort of sort of rust colour to the underside of the leaf. Victoria is favoured in the northwest Pacific coast of America because it's cold tolerant. In this individual garden, we like the grandiflora a lot because we're very close to the sea and wind is always a driving factor. We very often get limbs ripped off of the tulip tree and off of the big old Magnolia campbelli, but this can take really a lot of wind. It's interesting to read in Jim's book that the early settlers in America would plant it in front of their homesteads and pin down the branches, anchor them to the ground, and that meant that you had in an area that was absolutely hit by various different sort of enormous storms and really strong wind, that you had a very well anchored tree in front of your homestead and it protected the house behind it. But what we grow it for, of course, are the flowers, and the flowers are great big chalices in summertime. It's a late summer flowered species with this wonderful sweet lemon scent. So, Jim, I'll let you take on from here.
There's so many stories about Magnolia grandiflora, but it is, as Seamus says, it is very variable. You'll find huge plants that are 60, 70, 80 feet tall by as much wide as well. The leaves vary, very broad, very narrow. They have this cinnamon coloured indumentum and some not. And there's about 100 named clones in cultivation. Some are easy to root, some are not. And probably the best Magnolia grandiflora in cultivation in the States is Bracken's Brown Beauty. Now, I'm sorry to say, but the friends in the United States don't pick terribly good cultivar names. But one that is a nice cultivar name is called K. Paris, and it's Kevin Paris named it after his mum. And that's a delightful plant for a smaller garden. It's more upright, narrow leaves, and it flowers over a very long period of time. Seamus was talking about very old plants, introductions into Nantes in 1711. Well, it was about 1725 when it first came into England. Sir John Colleton retired as the administrator of the Carolinas, and as a present he was given the plant of Magnolia grandiflora, and so he sailed across to Exmouth and he planted it on the wall of his house. And his head gardener was very enterprising, because as it grew, what he did, he wanted to layer it and produce a whole lot of rooted plants. He put beer barrels adjacent to the wall and he rooted it in. And he sold them in the 18th century for 5 guineas each. Well, that's a lot of money.
Ambrose Congreve.
But against the wall at Anthony House in Cornwall is Magnolia grandiflora Exmouth, and it was planted in the 1780s, and it's still there. It's quite remarkable, really. So it shows you that just by pruning the longevity, how it improves the longevity of the plant. But if you do want to prune it and grow it against the wall, then you can fan train these against the wall, or you can grow them as a freestanding plant as well. But if you're fan training them and you prune it back, don't expect to find flowering that same year. So you prune it about every 3rd year, and so you get 2 good years, if that's what you want to do. But Goliath is probably the best one that you know planted against the wall of the house. For instance, at Bald Hill, which is a garden that I know very well in Sussex, that's got a huge, great big Goliath planted against the south-facing wall of the Elizabethan mansion. But what's interesting is that you can really put the chainsaw into it and prune it pretty hard if you want to do that. And within 3 years, you wouldn't realise that you've been pruning it. And what you've got to do, so importantly, prune it in the spring. If you prune it in the autumn, you're looking at an awful lot of kind of open wood for a long period of time. And behind me, or behind you should I say, in front of me, is another great magnolia, but this is the evergreen from China. This is Magnolia delevei. And Seamus, you might want to tell a story about the introduction of that particular plant to Kilmacurragh. But what I'll do is I'll just say that also it has rather transient flowering in the summer, but it is white scented, but there's also some pink forms of it as well. And a person, Sun Wei Bang, who is fairly senior at Kunming School of Botany, Institute of Botany, has got and has introduced pink flowered forms of Magnolia delaveyi as well.
Yeah. So the history of this magnolia, of course, it begins in China, where it's native to. So in 1886, a French missionary and plant collector, Père Jean-Marie Delaveyi, he was collecting at Long Kong, which is north of Dali in northwest Yunnan province in western China, and he collected material. So he sent his collections back to the Paris Museum to a French taxonomist called Adrien René Franchet, and Franchet described it in Plante Delaveyianae 3 years later. Then nothing more is heard about it until about 10 years later. So in 1899, the Beach Nursery sent out a young 22-year-old lad who had trained at the Birmingham Botanic Gardens. He'd worked at Kew briefly, and he was recruited by the Beach Nursery to go out to collect in China. He was given secret instructions that he only received when he arrived in Hong Kong, and his instructions were that he was to proceed to Sameo to meet an Irishman called Augustine Henry, and his task was to collect seed of the handkerchief tree, Davidia involucrata. So he departed from Hong Kong having got his directions to Augustine Henry. He met Augustine Henry at Sameo, sort of near the Lao border, and Henry travelled back with him to his former base at a place called Mengsi. And the reason he brought him back there was there's two plants that he said you've absolutely got to collect. One was Jasminum mesnii, which is a double-flowered yellow jasmine, and the other one was Magnolia delaveyi. And a bit like the Wallamai pine, it's bizarre that it's hardy in our climate, because I've been to Mengsi. It's in a subtropical region, but it's one of these paleo trees that formerly had a much wider dispersal. It's also been around for over 100 million years, so it's experienced times of climate change. We're in one now, but it's seen it several times over. So it actually proved hardy in our climate. So Augustine Henry brought him there. He collected seed. The first flowerings appeared within a very short space of time, 1908 at Kew. And when it flowered at Kew, it also was growing at Glasnevin. So Glasnevin, of course, was very heavily involved in the development of this garden. And at that time, our curator was Sir Frederick Moore. And he was determined to sort of get out newly introduced plants. So Glasnevin at the time was a Royal Botanic Gardens. It was a sister garden of Kew, sister garden of Edinburgh. And they were very influential in distributing new introductions across Ireland. So in 1918, Sir Frederick Moore had a plant sent to the Walpoles at Mount Usher, so still growing there to this day. In March 1919, Isabel Ball Acton, who lived in the house here, she received a letter from Sir Frederick Moore, and in it he states that myself and Phil, so Lady Moore, his wife, that they would be down, and he gives the date in April 1919 to plant Magnolia delaveyi. So we know that they planted the tree, and what's nice about that is that we also know that Sir Frederick Moore proposed to Lady Moore here in the gardens. So the Moores had their connection with this garden spanned between 1850 to 1957. It's a really, really long period of service to a garden. So we also have done Dr. Colin Kelleher, who's the keeper of the herbarium at Glasnevin, did the genetics on plants in Irish gardens about 10 years ago. And what we found is that there's two genotypes in Irish gardens. So there's the old Wilson, this is the old Wilson introduction that was propagated from the Glasnevin tree. And then there is a second genotype, for example, the tree that comes on the terrace at Burrowcastle, which was supplied to the 6 Ross in the 1940s. What I like about it is that it's evening flowered. It opens its blossoms after the gates are closed, and I live just in over that wall, so long after everybody is gone, you just get this waft of scent going into the courtyard in the evening time. You get these great big sort of chalice-like blooms, and they're kind of spread over the tree over a couple of weeks. It's slightly tender. The tree at Burrowcastle was badly damaged in 2010, This one was badly defoliated, but it does recover very quickly again. If you visit places like the Yufeng Temple, it's a temple tree in China. So if you visit the Yufeng Temple at Lijiang in Yunnan, you'll see a 400-year-old tree growing in the garden there that was protected by a Buddhist monk during the Cultural Revolution. He protected a camellia tree during that time. He sneaked in to keep the trees watered and looked after it during the Cultural Revolution. So that's Magnolia delaveyi, named after one of the great French missionary plant collectors. So we're going to move on, and we're going to look at perhaps the most famous of all magnolias that was introduced from China. It's one of the early introductions. It's the Yulan, and Jim, I know you're going to have a lot to say about that.
Oh, yeah.